Hello, welcome back to Getting Started with Generative AI in Research. So we have already discussed that you can use Generative AI to directly help you with your research. For example, you can ask it to help you with analyzing your data, but it can also be very useful in supporting your PhD journey, and I think it's not less important. We will discuss three potential use cases. So the first one of them is just reducing your administrative burden. For example, for me, it was always difficult to write emails, even if they're insignificant, like I just need to confirm appointment. I always was struggling with the text and I was rewriting it for a lot of times. Unfortunately, now this problem was solved for me thanks to Generative AI, because I now can quickly generate the first draft and just edit it, and it would be a nice email. I would, of course, will be careful if it's an important email and I might want to write them completely on my own. But if it's just administrative email, nobody actually cares if it's written by Generative AI or by myself, and that can be a really useful tool. There was a study when people tried to do something very similar. So their settings was a medical center, and they were using GenAI to generate drafts of letters that were later sent to patients. So it's very important that they were generating just drafts. They were not trying to automate the whole process. So there was always a human who was checking everything, rewriting everything, etc. And what they have found is that, so interestingly, it didn't reduce any time that was spent on emails, but it reduced subjective time, so people were reporting that they are now working faster, even though logs show that this is not the case. And probably as a result of that, their burnout also was reduced, and that was an actual improvement. And I guess you would probably agree that, during your PhD, anything that can reduce your burden would be really helpful. The second use case is about learning a new skill. So we have already discussed that it might be useful to learn programming, and that today is probably the best time to learn programming because it is now much easier thanks to Generative AI. And you can use Generative AI for the whole process of learning new skills. So you can start with assessing your knowledge. Then you can ask it to generate personalized exercises. You can ask to provide your feedback. If you're struggling with something, you can ask it to explain it to you, and it will be infinitely patient, always available 24 hours per day. So that can be really a powerful tool. So is there any evidence that suggests that it could actually work? There's a couple of studies that were trying to see how well AI can substitute teachers in learning settings. So this study was done in Harvard's largest physics class. And the design of the study was the following. So they have two experimental groups. And they, for the first group, for the first lecture, they used their standard settings. So their standard settings was instructor-guided active learning lecture. So I think there were students in this lecture was doing exercises, but there was tutors who were answering their questions, helping them, etc. And for the next lecture, the students from this group, they were just using AI-supported lesson. And this was reversed for the group 2. So why such design is because if you just try to implement like the first part of this, that would be a bad idea, especially in educational settings, because let's imagine that AI-supported lesson at home is much worse. Then by doing your experiment, you actually deprive these people from a high-quality learning. So that's a bad idea, that would be unethical, and that's why they use this more complicated design. So if you're curious what prompts they were using ChatGPT, but also with a specific prompt. And in this prompt, they described a role of this chatbot. So the role was AI physics tutor. And they also instructed it to act like a tutor, so not, for example, not to give directly an answer. So I think they write it here that you may confirm the answer if they get it right. But if students want the answer in the first message, encourage them to give it a try at first. So they instructed the chatbot via prompt to behave in a certain way. So this was a general prompt, and this general prompt was complemented by a specific question and specific solution to this question. And after that, students were allowed to interact with this chatbot. What they also have found is that, interestingly, using AI actually improved scores. So this is like a baseline knowledge, and this is improvement after normal settings, and this is improvement after AI intervention. So it seems that it's better. It was better to be taught by AI. Also, if you look at some other parameters, you can see that there was no changes in what can be called growth mindset. There was no changes in enjoyment and no differences. Students felt more motivated and more engaged when it was AI, not an actual lecture. We have to be a bit careful with interpretation here because it could be just a novelty effect, right? So the students tried something new, exciting, and maybe that's why they were more engaged and motivated. And also we should be careful about generalizing this result. So it worked really well in these particular settings. It doesn't mean that it works in all settings, but at the same time, it's quite encouraging result. So it seems that in some settings, generative AI can be really useful in learning. And the final use case that I wanted to cover is about supporting your well-being and mental health. And one thing that I wanted to emphasize is that generative AI cannot substitute professional help. And that's why I think it's very useful for you to also learn phone numbers for crisis line in your region. So this is for North South Wales, and if you're located somewhere else, I advise you just to remember these numbers. And this is like very serious. And I know colleagues from academia who were like literally saved by emergency interventions regarding mental health. So I want to emphasize the importance of this. It doesn't mean, however, that generative AI is completely useless. I would never recommend to use it to substitute professional help, but you can use it as supporting mechanism. And I really like this study exactly for this reason, because in this study what they try to see if generative AI can be helpful for mental health, but they were not trying to substitute professionals, they were trying to improve self-guided mental health interventions. So there are already interventions that are approved and that people do on their own, so they're self-guided. So, but can we improve them with generative AI? The particular mental health intervention was what's called cognitive restructuring of negative thoughts. And the idea is that we all have this thinking trap, and some of us are much more prone to these thinking traps. For example, there's a thinking trap called mind reading. What is mind reading? Is like when you think, oh, she didn't say hello, she must be mad at me. So I think this all the time. Or like, actually, I think most of these traps are really relatable to me. Like, I'm late for the meeting, I'll make a fool of myself. I said something embarrassing, I'm such a loser. They didn't text me back, nobody ever texts me back. Probably you're familiar with some of this. So it might be really useful to detect these thinking traps and then trying to reframe in a better way your thought. And it seems that it was helpful for many people, but you can imagine that this is something that's really hard to do on your own, right? Because when you're in this state of mind and when you are thinking in this way, it might be hard just to distance and to objectively see on what's going on. So they developed this chatbot that would ask you about your negative thought. For example, the negative thought might be, I'll never complete my PhD. Then this chatbot would ask you what a recent situation that led to this thought. And you might say, my research project failed. And it would also ask for a context about your current emotion. So you can already see that there's probably this overgeneralization problem, right? So it's just research projects that failed. It doesn't mean that this person would never complete PhD. The chatbot tried to using like thinking trap classifier that was developed by the authors of this paper. It tries to identify the thinking trap and actually suggests user to select from a couple of options. So, which gives user freedom, right? So it could be that this classifier is not working perfectly, but it's not a problem because you can say, oh, actually, fortune telling is much more suitable for me at this moment. So you can select this catastrophizing, for example, that you're focusing on the worst case scenario. And after that, they use another GenAI tool that's a reframe generator that's trying to reframe your thinking. It suggests how it can be reframed. Like, this research project was a setback, but it's just one step on my PhD journey. I will take this as a learning experience, and I'm sure I will do better next time. They also allowed users to edit these reframes, because it could be if it was entirely generated by GenAI, it's not really relatable to you. So there is this idea of, you can just edit it and to make it more relatable and more helpful. So what was the result of this study, they have found that for majority of people there was reduction in negative emotion intensity, so that was good. For a quarter of them there was no changes, which is also not so bad, and for some of them there was increase in negative emotion intensity, which is not surprising because there might be many other factors that influence this. But overall, I think that if your intervention has this profile, you would be happy to implement it. As I have mentioned, they found that it was useful to allow users to edit these reframes. What they have found is that if you do this, then you actually have a reduction in emotion intensity. It's statistically significantly better. Interestingly, for other parameters, like if participant thinks that this is more helpful or more relatable, there was no changes, but this is the most important probably because you actually want to have reduction in negative emotion intensity. Because they have a really large sample size, authors were able to see how this works for different social groups. And so here green is means that it's for this group it's statistically significantly higher than for average, and red means that it's statistically significantly worse. So one thing that's consistent here is that it doesn't work so well for younger ages. So you can see there's a lot of red in this area. And the hypothesis that authors had was that maybe it's because this text generated by GenAI is too kind of formal, not relatable. So they were thinking maybe we should change this text. And again, you can just ask LLM to do it. So they were asking it to revise the following text to make it easy to understand for a fifth grader, also make it more casual. So here's an example of how it could look like. Let's say the initial thought is I'm worthless, I haven't done anything valuable in my life. And the original reframe may be, I may not have achieved all of my goals yet, but I'm still valuable and capable of doing great things, etc. And the simply casual reframe would sound like I haven't reached all my goals yet, but that's okay. I'm still awesome and I can do awesome things. So this is more casual and maybe more relatable for young people. And that is what they found indeed. So they have found that such reframes were more helpful according to self-reports, and also more relatable. They didn't see statistically significant reduction in emotional intensity, however, so it was kind of mixed result. What I like about this paper is that they were able to test different approaches. They also report a lot of results, not just positive results, but also negative results when we see no difference. So I would definitely recommend you to check this paper, and maybe it can inspire you for your own approaches to generative AI. For example, when I was studying university, and that was a very long time ago, I was struggling with social anxiety, and I think the most difficult part for me was that there is always a lot of uncertainty when it comes to real-time interactions. And I could imagine that what might be helpful for me if I have GenAI at that point of time in the past, and I could just talk with it and we can role play different scenarios, so it might be helpful. It doesn't mean that it could substitute professional support. I think social anxiety is quite treatable, so it makes sense to actually get a professional treatment, but maybe it could solve some of my problems. Maybe there was some situation when I would be able to communicate more effectively and to achieve my goals in the past. So maybe you'll find that GenAI is helpful for you, but please don't forget about professional support. And that's all for today. I see you in next video.